Welcome back. Intro to drawing. These are instructions for making an 18 by 24 one-point perspective grid. I'd like you to begin by placing your 24-inch ruler along the bottom margin of the page and dividing that margin up by inches. You should end up with an even inch on both ends. And notice I'm making very short lines. The shorter the better. We will be aiming for the bottoms of those lines when we draw our orthogonals in the next step. So keep the ends of the ruler flush with the ends of the paper, and I hope you can see that. Now I'm going to measure up 12 inches from the bottom of the page, make a mark, draw a horizon line at 12 inches. Notice I've taped my paper down flush with the left edge of the board because I like to keep the T-square head on the left. If you like your T-square on the right, make sure your paper's hanging out on the other side. While I have that there, I'm going to mark the center of that line, 12 inches, and that will be my vanishing point. Now I'm going to take the same ruler, pivoting around my pencil point. I'm going to make lines very faintly, going from the vanishing point to the corner of the page, and then from the vanishing point, aiming for the bottom of each of these marks. So see what I'm doing? Put my pencil at the bottom of the mark, slide the ruler up to it, slide the other side of the ruler up to the vanishing point, and do the lines like that. I'm going to pause the video now so that you don't have to watch me do all of these. So when you get near the end, keep going. And if you're having a hard time making your lines light enough, just focus on not clenching the pencil so hard. Usually when we are holding the pencil tightly, we're going to make a light line, but if you just focus on how you're holding the pencil, that's where you have nerve endings, in your fingers, not at the end of the pencil. So that's the first level of orthogonals. Orthogonals are in perspective lines that go to the vanishing point. We're going to add on to this level by using a little simple math. If we measure up 6 inches, which is halfway to our horizon, we can create another horizontal at a level where units are now half as big. This is 24 inches. By going up halfway into this triangle, we found a place where this same fan is only 12 inches across. That means, but it still has the same number of units, 24. That means units up here are only a ½ inch each. So we can add on to our units like this. Measure by ½ inches going this way, like this. And slide the ruler down. See, I'm making sure that the 6 is right here, and measure by ½ inches going this way. And I could have done that even higher up, found a place where units are 1/4 of an inch, or even 1/8 of an inch, and added even more orthogonals, but this will be enough for our purposes. So I'm going to pause again in a moment so you don't have to make You don't have to watch me make every single one of these, but watch the technique. It's the same thing. Just find your mark, pivot the ruler around your mark, and pull your line down the ruler very lightly, like that. All the way to the end. Okay, that's enough orthogonals. We're now going to figure out how to draw our horizontals. The important thing here is that they're spaced correctly. The ones near the bottom are going to be relatively far apart, and as they move up, they're going to get closer and closer together. The important idea here also, though, is that our first horizontal has to represent squares on a grid. And squares on a grid, when the grid is laying down, turned away from you like this, are going to be slightly foreshortened. For that reason, if I measure 1 inch back, like that, and draw a horizontal right there, that is not going to look to most people like a representation of a square on a grid. Let me show you a square by comparison. If we look straight down on a grid like this, this and this appear equal lengths. But if we tilt the grid away from us, the way we're trying to draw it here, notice that the distance from here to here looks much smaller than this distance here to here, which is why this looks like about actually 2 squares and not 1 square. See how much better that would look? It looks more like this. It just happens that if we create a diagonal that goes from this corner of the page through this dot, that's the dot that we created when the intersection of this last orthogonal here with the 6-inch horizontal. If we aim our ruler at that point, make a diagonal right here, that is going to be a nice approximation of what a square would look like at that height on the grid. Let me just draw that for you so you can see what I mean. So what I'm asking you to consider is that this shape here now looks very similar to this shape here. Now, if you have found one horizontal for 1 square in the grid, you've obviously found a horizontal for that whole row. So what we can now do is just extend that line all the way across, making sure the head of the T-square is firmly against the side of the drafting board, like that. And that's the first row of squares on the grid. Really useful idea with grids is that if you make a diagonal that goes through any 2 corners on the grid, it's also going to keep going through corners forever, as long as that grid goes on. And that's true whether or not you're looking at it flat or if you're looking at it in perspective. So that's going to save us from doing a lot of math. We're just going to put the diagonal, it goes through there, through those 2 corners that we already found. Remember, it was aiming for that point. And pull it all the way up and across. And thanks to that, we now have an easy way to draw all our other horizontals. at the exact correct spacing. There's probably a mathematical equation that could achieve something similar with a lot more trouble, but we like to keep it simple. So notice I'm just sliding the t-square up, getting on my point, and then lightly pulling lines left and right from that intersection. Now that I'm this far up, it's going to be easier for me to just draw on the top edge of the t-square. Notice you can draw on top or bottom. And just keep in mind that the head of the square has to be tight against the board. Otherwise, you make a line like that or like that, and it's not really, the tool's not working for you. And don't stress out and make your lines too dark, because the shapes we're drawing are all on top of this. And it's going to be hard to see your shapes if you make your grid too dark. Pause again. And that's the finished one-point perspective grid. You can see how nicely the spacing between each horizontal narrows as we go back. If you kept going back much further, you get to a point where the pencil lines are actually so thick that you just have a solid, you wouldn't be able to see the spaces in between them. So this is a good distance to work back for now. In the next video, we'll start adding shapes onto this grid. Thank you.